All right. Good morning, everyone. I think it's time to begin. I don't want to. I would like to begin immediately so that we have enough time for our speakers' presentation and discussion later on. I'd like to welcome all of you and thank for your interest in this colloquium, especially on Saturday morning when you could still be sleeping in your warm bed. Thanks once again for coming. As you all may know, this year's Moo-Sook colloquium is on the topic of Uigwe. Those of you who don't know, who are not familiar about Uigwe may soon find out what it is. But we're very delighted to have distinguished guests this year, experts on the topic of Uigwe here with us and share their expertise. I'm sure you have a lot of opportunity to learn about this fascinating documents today that was produced during the Joseon Dynasty. This is the document, Uigwe document, was returned on a renewable, not completely returned, but on a five-year renewable loan basis to South Korea from France. If you have read the abstract of the program, this document was taken by France during the French campaign in 1866 toward the end of the Joseon Dynasty, and so. It is. There were several events related, especially at the museums, related to the Uigwe documents. But I think it is timely to have this colloquium on an academic conference and be able to explore in depth about the Uigwe documents today. Before we begin, I'd like to briefly acknowledge those who sponsored this event: Korea Foundation, Korean Language and Translation Institute, Seeger Center, Dean's Office of Colloquium College, History Department, and Institute of Ethnographic Research. I'd like to thank all these institutes for sponsoring us, the colloquium, and also my co-conveners, Greg Brzezinski here, and Richard Grinker, who worked so hard to organize this event today. And also finally, Mike Buffard from Seeger Center, which we could not have prepared this event without his help. And we'd like to begin with our opening remark. Professor Youngi Kim Renaud will be giving us an opening remark, and I cannot thank of any better person who could give this opening remark today. She was my predecessor and the initiator of this colloquium, and she continues to provide strong support. In order to save time, I will not, all the speakers' bio is in this program, and I will skip the introduction. And without further ado, I would like to welcome Professor Kim Renaud.
My dear colleagues, students, friends, ladies and gentlemen, good morning. I'm honored and moved to stand here today to open the 23rd Moo-Sook Colloquium in the Korean Humanities, titled Visualizing Royal Ceremonies, Korean Culture Through the Uigwe Royal Documents of Joseon Dynasty. As many of you know, I retired last June from GW, where I worked a long time. This is the first time I'm attending this colloquium not as a co-convener, but as a member of the audience. I'm honored because opening remarks are usually done by some prominent people. Today is different. The new team leading the HMS colloquium gave me this honor, not as someone prominent, but as a founder and maybe as a long-term convener of the colloquium in an affectionate and friendly standoff as the new generation takes the baton. As I was preparing to retire, we considered the possibility of making the HMS colloquium series, not just in the Korean humanities, but in the East Asian or even Asian humanities. One reason for such a broadened scope was that it would be difficult to find someone who could or would be willing to put in the kind of time and effort needed to organize even one meeting, let alone a series year after year. Like a miracle, Professor Jisoo Kim appeared in my office one day, eloquently emphasizing the need for this colloquium series to continue. She agreed with many others who have attended this program for many years that the HMS Colloquium has become an institution important for understanding of Korea, and that it cannot end with my retirement. To my great astonishment and joy, she offered herself as my successor. It was perhaps written in heaven, for even as a graduate student at Columbia University and a dear disciple of the late Jayan Kim Ha-bush, who has spoken at the colloquium a couple of times, she traveled from New York to attend the HMS Colloquium. So one of the few students who came from far from Washington. I'm thrilled that she has now organized 2 colloquia as if she had always done it. Jisoo succeeded in earning the confidence and the continued help from our usual colleagues and sponsors. And she has proven to be more efficient than I ever was, especially in certain details. I'm most grateful to Jisoo and all the other colleagues and sponsors who are already noted in the program. Another cause of happiness is that we can finally hold a colloquium on the Uigwe royal books of the Joseon dynasty. They have recently drawn much attention from Koreans as part of the rediscovery of their own past and the accompanying self-esteem. In 2007, the Uigwe were inscribed in the UNESCO Memory of the World Register for their rare features and unique historical significance. Some of these books were seized by French troops during the campaign against Korea in 1866 in retaliation for the Korean persecution of French Catholic missionaries. These royal books were kept at the Bibliothèque Nationale de France in Paris. They were forgotten for more than 100 years until Dr. Park Byung-sun, a Korean scholar of history who became a librarian with a lifelong purpose of finding them, and she did in 1975. In 2011, they were finally returned to Korea, although under the legal feature of a 5-year renewable loan. Here I'd like to mention briefly 3 very different personal experiences surrounding books and Uigwe in particular. Growing up in Korea, I always knew how much Koreans revered books. Books were often painted or embroidered as a common motif in decorative folk paintings, which frequently reflected deeply held values, almost like prayers. However, a love and respect for books was so natural to me that I didn't realize how much Koreans have revered books until, I believe, in early 1970s, Professor Roger Leverrier, a French professor who spent most of his life teaching in Korea, referred to a report on Korea published in 1873 by a naval officer, M.H. Joubert, who participated in the 1866 French campaign. So Joubert wrote, I'll just give a translation. A fact that one cannot but admire throughout the Far East, and does not flatter our own French self-esteem is the presence of books in the poorest homes. Koreans who cannot read are very rare and incur the contempt of their fellow citizens. In France, there would be many to despise if the opinion against illiterate people were as severe as in Korea. A second experience was my visit to Professor Han Young-woo, professor of history and the first director of Gyujangak Library of Seoul National University. On his long coffee table, he was spreading out the sheet and coloring what looked like a children's coloring book. I cannot forget the pride and love on his face as he told me that his favorite pastime in those years was copying Uigwe. As a historian and as a Korean, this hobby was almost resembling a religious practice. For in Korea, to show devotion, often people copied a whole Buddhist sutra. And in fact, my brother did copy the whole Bible for the 60th birthday of my father. And history is the most noble of all writings, as it is what has actually happened, not a product of imagination. It is often written in most articulate and elegant styles. So it's the utmost form of literature. Koreans, like everyone, want to be well remembered when they are gone. They seek eternity through their descendants. People also write to legitimize things. In case of the kings, even the progenitor of the new dynasty. And in royal matters, claiming a heavenly mandate was of utmost importance. Record keeping was considered an essential way of trying to perfect oneself, as Confucians believed man is perfectible. And doing things right was extremely important in Korea. Like in some religions of oral tradition believe that rituals lose their effect when one word is mispronounced. When Koreans were called the Eastern nation of etiquette by ancient Chinese, perhaps others sensed this aspect. Uigwe books are indeed the protocol records of the highest order. My third and most recent experience was seeing, under the guidance of none other than Professor Lee Seung-mi, our first speaker of today's colloquium, and arguably the most significant scholar of Uigwe, some of the best examples of Uigwe during the special exhibition on the return of the Gyujangak Uigwe from France. Records of the state rites of the Joseon dynasty, which was held for 2 summer months in 2011 and made our vacation in Korea so wonderful. This exhibition celebrated the return of the Uigwe, stolen from their rightful place, Gyujangak. By the way, we visited this past summer in Gangwon Island, and it was smaller, surprisingly smaller than we had imagined. Had just returned to Korea after 145 years. With our family's multiple French connections, this was a most awe-inspiring exhibition. However, we were not so much thinking about who stole what and how, etc., but we were in simple admiration of the beauty and the dignity emanating from the books. The exhibited items and their presentation were absolutely astounding. Their modern display clearly showed the sophistication and power of present Korean design and technology. It is no wonder that other countries are now consulting Korean museologists when organizing their exhibitions. In Korea, with modern technology, Every birthday, every wedding, every graduation, competition, award ceremonies, speeches, political hearing, rallies, and even crime scenes are video recorded. Different camera angles are actually the reality of life, as clearly shown as in linguistic structures. Today, we are most fortunate to be able to hear directly from some of the most distinguished experts on the Uigwe books. I sincerely hope and trust that you will go home thinking you made the right choice to come to the HMS Colloquium in the Korean humanities, sacrificing your leisurely walk, kicking some leaves in this gorgeous autumn day. Thank you.
Thank you, Professor Kim Renaud. So this is what happens. I began this colloquium even without introducing myself. My name is Ji-Soo Kim. I'm in History Department at GW. I'm one of the co-conveners of this colloquium, and I would like to emphasize again and thanking Professor Kim Renaud for her continued support and help, and I'd like to thank her being very patient with me when I kept on sending really literally hundreds of emails asking all the questions about the preparation. Thanks once again. Now we would like to begin the first session, and our first speaker is, as Professor Kim Renaud just mentioned, is really one of the most renowned speakers of the Uigwe documents. And please welcome Professor Lee Sung-mi.
Blocks the view. Can you see me? Okay, fine.
Or maybe we could use this one.
Can you hear me? Yes. Okay, good. My job is today something that's almost impossible because I have to introduce this vast amount of material in 30 minutes. So, by the way, do you have my text? 텍스트는 들어왔어요. We handed in our papers in advance. I thought you printed them out. Okay, that's fine. May I have show of hands? How many of you do know something about Uigwe? Okay, it's less than half. So I thought I would just go through basic things about Uigwe at the beginning and then sample important aspects of all these Uigwe documents. And then in conclusion, I will present what we can get out of all these endless amount of information in advancing our understanding of Korean history, culture, and particularly since I'm an art historian, art history. So I'll go through, forget about my text, and then I will go through the PPTs very fast. This is the first character of the term Uigwe. So it's all self-explanatory, so I will not read them. So when I was in Washington, D.C., more than 10 years ago, when my husband was the ambassador here, my husband wanted me to do a short lecture during the lunchtime at the embassy for his staff. So I did that. And then at the end of the lecture, people were coming out. And I heard somebody saying, after all, I thought Uigwe was a clothing chest. Because if you write characters differently, the first one, Ui, can also have a character meaning clothing. And Kwe has a character meaning chest. So at least that much I accomplished during the lunchtime. So I decided that the translation, we have to actually make it clear what this is. Book of State Rites, that's what I decided. And then there are other English translations such as these, but none of them are complete, but I will not explain why. No time. And then during the early 15th century, during the time of King Seongjong, there was a book published, 국조 오례의, or Five Rites of the State. And the 5 rites are ancestral worship rites, celebratory rites, and royal weddings, reception of foreign envoys, military rites, royal funeral, and other related rites. So these are the important 5 rites. And all these things were performed in utmost formality. And after all these things, in most cases, Uigwe books were created. Now, by the way, I will be just using some terms once I explain. And I feel that we have to teach the Westerners some of the terms, because Japanese people do that all the time. Everybody knows what kimono is. So, like kimono, you have to learn what Uigwe means. And there will be several other terms that you will be learning today. Now, all the Uigwe documents produced before the Japanese invasion of Korea at the end of the 16th century were all but destroyed. But we have so many still left. So these are the places where they are kept. And Youngi just explained the return of the royal viewing Uigwes from the Bibliothèque Nationale de France. I will be referring to it as BNF. As of end of May 2011, and then many more came back to Korea from the imperial household affairs. So we have all existing Uigwes now in Korea except for the one in British Library in London. This one is really a very excellent book in terms of illustrations, but it was sold. It was a public property. Somehow it was sold to British Library, and there's no way we can claim unless we hope for their mercy. So the Uigwe that were kept in the BNF library is the ones that were stored in this little building in Ganghwa Island, and it's called 외 규장각, outer 규장각, meaning that this is another Kyujangak that's like the branch of Kyujangak in Seoul. So this is the picture from the end of 19th century album. And what is important about things here is that most of the things that were kept in here were the best copies, royal viewing copies. And Youngie talked about the invasion of French Navy, so I will not go through again. That's the look of Hong Island with French naval ships. They are coming onto the land and all these buildings, including the Wei Kyujangak Library. And then only in 2003, this was rebuilt. Looks small, but kept really the important items of the late Joseon period. Now, most people think that all Uigwe books have illustrations, especially Panchado or this. If you know the characters, Panchado is rank, positions, painting, positioned painting. So I will just say Panchado from now on for this procession painting. So as you can see, of all 637 categories of Uigwe books, only 163 or only 26% of them contain Panchado, whereas the B and F Uigwe contain a lot more than the general percentage because so many of them concerned with the funeral rites or wedding rites. So now I have to tell you the difference between the royal viewing copies and the history archive copies. When until 1795, all Uigwe books were handwritten and hand copied, hand painted. But the cover and the binding and the inside the characters and the illustrations were quite different because royal viewing copies are all neatly written and well illustrated with red page boundaries, whereas the history archives copy is not so neatly written, and you can, as you turn the page, you can see the change of hands. So, with this general introduction, I will go into 5 rites of the state. The first one is ancestral worship rites. Actually, it has a lot more than ancestral worship rites. It includes rites to the heaven and earth and other minor gods. But since we don't do much of those, I will just show you the Chongmyo ancestral rites. This one is the front view of Chongmyo, and the current Chongmyo building is the largest existing wooden structure in the world, and the front width is 101 meters, so it's about 112 or 13 yards. And so annual ancestral rites are being performed once a year by the descendants of the Yi royal family. And it's open to public, and you can go and have a look the first Sunday of May. Just show you the scenes, no time to explain. Oh, I have to tell a little bit about this dance. It's called 팔일무, but Korea is the only place where this age-old Chinese tradition have been kept intact. So this dates back to the time of Confucius, but we are the only country in the world who still maintain this. So it's beautiful. And then Chongmyo, Uigwe all explain how the rites should be conducted with utmost sincerity and formality and so on. But Chongmyo Uigwe is different from other Uigwes in that it's not a record of one particular event. But it has something, it explains how Chongmyo building evolved over the years and what kind of rules were applied to who stays in the main hall and whose spirit tablets will be moved to another building called the Yeongnyeongjeon. And so there is no 반차도. It's a kind of history of Chongmyo, institution of history. And so it has a lot of these illustrations of important costumes and ritual utensils and so on. And then this is another separate book. It's a very large book, 85.8 centimeters. So I think this is the largest book in the world I have seen. I've seen quite huge early Christian manuscript, but it's not as tall as this. This is narrow, but it comes something like this from 85 centimeters. But it has all the things about what is in these cabinets in each of the 19 spirit tablet rooms in Chongmyo. So in this cabinet, you can find these treasures. And they are bamboo book, jade seal, and letter of appointment bestowed to crown grandson, later King Cheongjo, by King Yeongjo in 1759. So by doing this, they want to perpetuate the history of the Joseon dynasty and legitimacy of the Joseon royal lines. The second one is Karye. Karye, the character Ka means beautiful and celebratory. So there are so many in this category, but I'm talking about just two things. The first one is this Uigwe of investiture, right, of Crown Prince, later Gyeongjong. And there are 5 of these remaining today, but since this is the earlier and clearer thing that I'm showing you. So it explains how the ceremony of investiture rite is being performed, first of all, making all these ritual items and bringing them to the palace in this kind of procession. And then they go through certain rites at the palace, mostly in Injeongjeon during this period, because Gyeongbok Palace in Seoul was the main palace, but it was burnt during the Japanese invasion and was not rebuilt until the 1864. So, this is the Crown Prince's palanquin, and this small palanquin is carrying the King's letter of appointment, or Gyomyeong. Gyomyeong is very important. And then here you have the Crown Prince's honor guards with flags and ritual weapons. These are all very beautiful procession of the event and something to watch for the people. And so during the Joseon dynasty, everybody came out to the street to watch these processions. And so we find the term 관광 인민 in the veritable record of the Joseon period, Joseon 왕조실록. Nowadays, 관광 is really the key word in Korean cultural scene. So many foreigners come to Korea for 관광, to look at the scenery and other events. So we have this for Joseon dynasty's people. Another aspect of Karye is the wedding event, and there are 20 Uigwes throughout the Joseon period we still have. But King Yeongjo's second wedding, 1759, is the most famous because we have this B&F copy and History Archives copy in Korea that we can compare. And this is the king's palanquin. Earlier, only the queen's palanquin could be seen because the procedure was different. Earlier, only the king or the groom did not go to meet the bride because he just sent a messenger to bring her to the palace from the 별궁, or the separate residence for the crown princess to be. But sometime slightly before this period, the rite, the details of the rite changed to that the king or the groom had to go and get her to 별궁 and bring her, of course, not in the same palanquin. They don't ride together. I wish they did, but they didn't. And so this is the king's palanquin, and you will see that all the people surrounding him are all male. And the doors are all open. But in Queen's palanquin, the curtains are all closed, and you will see female attendants guarding her on either side. See the palanquin. And then I found out important things about the difference between royal copy and history archives copies. Can you see the difference in detail? What is important is the way of course the palanquin themselves are different, but this one, history archives copies, don't have the bars and the strings, so it's hovering in the air. Another different illustration, but I know I don't have time. And this reception of foreign envoys, mostly Chinese envoys, it's called binrye. Bin means guests. So here, Korean, this was the one in 1608, Gwang Hae-gun's period. This Chinese chief envoy, it has label called 천사. And 천사 has another meaning, angel. But here, that doesn't mean angel, but it means Chinese emperor's emissary. So he came to mourn King Injo's death. And we have this procession painting in this figure, and shows this is very important and interesting. It says 부물체요, which means vegetable objects, silk, palanquin. And you can see that in wedding affairs, all the palanquins are all beautifully painted in color, but since this is funeral-related thing, it doesn't have any colorful painting. And then look at the live animal coming. I mean, I'm sure by this time it's dead, but a cow and a pig and a lamb, three of them were seen in this procession painting. So it's very interesting to see different kinds of illustration in the panchato. And the musicians are here, but during the funeral, they're not supposed to play music. So they don't play music, but attend in the procession. Let's see, is there time? How many? 5 minutes?
Yeah.
Okay. This Professor Park Jung-hee will go into, but this is the only one Uigwe of military rights during the reign of King Yeongjo. He wanted to have Korean military strength during, by this time, Korea became very strong after the two invasions, Japanese and Chinese, but he was determined to have a strong military. So he revived this ancient military right. And there are 12 pages of illustrations, but I'm showing you only the first part that has something to do with the king's archery right. So 1, 2, 3, 4 pages. Here is the king's canopy and all of his attendants, and his sedan, his palanquin is parked here, and the yellow flag here it has dragon, 2 dragon painting in here, but not shown. But it's the symbol of king or king's presence. So all these musicians are here. They actually did play music. And then this is interesting. That's the target. If a king shoots, I don't know exactly, somewhere around here, the arrow should come right here. So what I did was I put these 4 vertically, like this, to make one scene. And you see that the target is upside down. And the guy here is standing, he's supposed to catch the arrow. The king will not kill him. And so this is interesting because you have to imagine the space here from the king's canopy to the target. You have to sort of imagine the enclosed space. Then it has to have this upside down target. I didn't bring the slide, but there's another illustration of the same event in Korea University and elsewhere, but they don't show it upside down. They didn't understand the spatial character of this thing. So this is really an interesting aspect of Uigwe illustration. And Uigwe of funeral state right, very, very complicated. So I don't think I have time, but there are 4. This one, 빈전, 혼전. 빈전 is where the king's coffin stays until the funeral day proper. And that's the funeral Uigwe. And this one is the construction of royal tombs, which takes about 4 or 5 months time since after his death. And then Bumyo, this one is finally, after 27 months of the funeral, the king's spirit tablet is moved to the Chongmyo royal shrine. So it has, let's see, this Uigwe has procession, and Sanneung, or the royal tomb doesn't have, but Bumyo also has procession of the spirit tablet going to the Chongmyo. So there's so many paintings in this. And this is King Injo's BNF copy, 1649. And this, now you can see the difference, the white costume for the funeral of most of the people here. But now from here, it's the procession of newly installed king. After 5 days, the crown prince assumes the kingship, and that's his normal honor guard. And then others are all white, and these guys are interesting. That only appears in the funeral Uigwe, and that's called 방상시, and it's kind of demon fiddler. So he goes into the royal tomb and tries to chase out anything, any bad spirits that might be in there. So before the burial, and then funeral bier proper, and that's. I took this from a different one, very scary look of 방상시, so that he can chase out the demon spirits. And then funeral bier proper, very large palanquin, and right behind the funeral bier is the section where wailing palace ladies are discreetly hidden in this drapes. And then these are the other princes. And I took this Emperor Sejong's state funeral in 1926. You can see so many people carrying the bier. So I have to go through just the pictures now. Here is the interesting aspects of the 4 animals that decorated a small house-shaped structure which was put beside the tomb before the king's coffin was laid into the chamber. And so you know about the 4 deities, like the Goguryeo period, the painting. So these 4 animals or deities of the Goguryeo period got changed a great deal in form and style. King Injo's tomb and King Cheongjo's tomb. But these we can see only in Uigwe's, because that small structure called Changung had to be burned after the burial. So we don't have any of these except for in Uigwe illustrations. So that's the end of the 5 rites, but there are so many other Uigwes outside of 5 rites. and this is Uigwe royal portraits. This 반차도 is from Uigwe copying 7 past kings in copying 7 past kings' portraits. And this is during the Hahn Empire period. And so the soldiers all wore modern costume. And these are all yellow in accordance with the imperial rite. So this large palanquin carries Emperor Taejo, and they all renamed the past kings as emperor. So it's called emperor. And this is too long to go through, but interesting things can be found in these Uigwe, how the painters were selected and so on. So this just, I will just let you have a quick look at the, what is important here is the, not only the painters should have excellent skills, but also they should abide by the Confucian virtues, not to put any artist to work when they were in mourning period for their parents, 3 years most of the time. And then a painter's ancestors should be free from treason. It is very important. And so I will just skip all these things. This is to show how many times King Kojong sat for his painters. He sat for his painters more than 50 times because this is after the influence of Western painting came to Korea during the early 18th century. So they wanted to have the real look of the king when they paint. And then these are the illustrations of 5 big screens. And this is what I think is really important. Not only the illustrations, but the texts of the Uigwe document book serve as visual and documentary evidence for the study of Joseon culture in general and study of history of art. So let's see. What I found out is that we have so many of these huge, colorful paintings everywhere in Korea, but until before the 20th century, or I should say, before the research of Uigwe documents, simply they were called binrye or folk paintings because they were so different from the literati ink paintings. They're too colorful, and Yangban shouldn't have such colorful things, they thought. But in fact, these were created and used in palaces for specific purposes. So I found out so many documents relating to, this is 5-feet screen, and then this is 10 symbols of longevity, mostly used for weddings and for banquets. And this peony screen is also for weddings and also for funeral. It's very interesting. And this is a story of a Chinese person, but he is a symbol of happy life. So this became favorite screens for weddings since the early 19th century. In fact, 1802 is the first year this screen appears in wedding documents. And then this is interesting. We only have one reference to peacock painting in the 1828 court banquet Uigwe, but we find not this kind of single independent painting of peacocks, but we have sections of multi-panel screens in which we find images of peacocks. And peacocks are for the king, not for the ladies. So I wrote a paper on these palace paintings recently, actually, and how these paintings were used in the palace and how, for whom these paintings were painted. So usually if there is an event, a king should be surrounded by the 5 big screens. And ladies have several different kinds of screens. So these were all spelled out very clearly. And then we value this section called 공장지, or section on Uigwe, Yeongjo's wedding, showing list of artisans. And so we have names of artisans, not only the names, but different names, different variety of the handicraft. So these are all from Uigwe that I found. And then I compared the list of painters and artisans with existing documentary records. And I found that so many more of the artisans and painters' names were listed in these documents. So it was a great discovery. And then another section that I was interested in 상점, or awards. After each event, the court bestowed gifts to all the participants. So the yellow section is for the Prime Minister Nam Hong-chol. He's a very famous person. He got a head of a horse here, 내구마 in Chinese character. This means the best horse trained and groomed and kept in the royal stable. So he got that. And then the second person got the just trained horse, something like that. And all of you know that now in Korea, the best car is called equus. So this is exactly that. So all the ministers, I think, ride equus. So comparison is very interesting. And then what is most fascinating is this one, which is change of social status from good people to, from the outcast to good people. So during the Joseon period, basically there's these two, Yangmin and Cheonmin. And Yangmin can be 산농 공상, but if you are born in Cheonmin, your descendants are all in Cheonmin, outcast. So this is the only chance. Or I found another records of this change of status, which is if you catch a thief or something, you do valiant things for the society, then you can ask for change of status. But once you become Yangmin, then your descendants will all be Yangmin from that time on. So this is a great social movement, social status movement, very important. And Uigwe has plenty of information already. And this is King Yeongjo's time, that in 1767, some of the palace ladies and performers got this change of status, revolutionary thing. And so another thing that I would like to show last is this thing, Chang'anmun in Hwasong. This is in the Uigwe of 1801, Hwasong Seongnyeok Uigwe. And this is the second Uigwe that was printed in metal print, and illustrations were all done in woodblock prints. And when the UNESCO people came to examine evaluate the Hwasong citadel, they were surprised for the beauty of this citadel, but they were more surprised by the fact that this kind of Uigwe, recording all aspects of Chang'an, the citadel construction, was kept, and during the reconstruction of this citadel in 1975 to 79, this Uigwe was almost instrumental in reconstructing this building. So Uigwe documents were so valuable, both in illustration and contents, to let us understand better the Joseon dynasty's court culture. Thank you.
I'm so sorry for not providing the text that she mentioned. I thought that was the PowerPoint that she was going to use for this presentation, but she had prepared another very beautiful PowerPoint here. What I'll do is I'll provide the link. I'll provide the PowerPoint and PowerPoint available. I'll make the PowerPoint available on our website so that you'll be able to see the beautiful images after the colloquium. Our next speaker is Professor Park Jung-hye from Academy of Korean Studies. Please welcome Professor Park.